A faint clinking echoed in the room. As the ice water hit her face, the first thing she heard was the rattle of ice cubes against the sides of the glass. An L, 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 L. Instant later, cold streams slid down her forehead, flooding her eyes. They traced the bridge of her nose, the corners of her lips, and, dripping from her neck, began to pool on the floor. Emily lay on the living room floor. She was still wearing the old apron she'd had on from early morning until late at night, cooking for Thanksgiving dinner. She had chopped ingredients for the potato salad, roasted a turkey, and fried endless appetizers. Every time she inhaled, a sharp pain stabbed her chest, as if her ribs were being squeezed tight by a wet towel. On the screen of the digital thermometer, which had rolled to the leg of the day 2 sofa, the number 103 degrees Fahrenheit glowed. Her husband, Michael, stood over her with the empty glass in his hand, showing no intention of moving. Instead, he stared at her as if she were a dirty rag on the hardwood floor, a deep furrow etched between his brows. With irritation, he muttered for her to stop the theatrics, claiming that no one dies from a simple cold. He asked who she was putting on this drama for. Considering his parents were visiting, Emily's wet eyelashes stuck together. She tried to open her mouth, but a heavy cough erupted from the depths of her throat. Following it, a dry, metallic rattle echoed in her chest. She clawed her fingers into the seams of the wooden floorboards, unable to get up. The thick smell of dashed, fried oil still hung in the kitchen. The day before, she had spent the entire day on her feet, in front of the stove, without a break, preparing a countless array of appetizers, salads, and main courses. 2 burns from splattering hot oil reddened the back of her hand. Her mother-in-law, Brenda, sat at the dining table, not hiding her satisfaction as she transferred the most golden brown pieces of turkey into plastic containers, complaining all the while about how clumsy and slow her daughter-in-law was with household chores. Her father-in-law, Arthur, ruddy-faced from the expensive small-batch Kentucky bourbon he had been drinking, didn't even think to clear his dirty glass when he had a dote, struggled up from the table. Meanwhile, Michael was laughing loudly in the living room, watching football with his cousins. When one of the relatives commented on how lucky Michael was to have such a hard-working wife, he just chuckled and replied that on normal days, she didn't lift a finger at home, so at least during the holidays, she had to earn her keep. Those words stabbed Emily's chest like daggers and tormented her all night. But what truly broke her wasn't the resentment, but the chills, the soaring fever, and the suffocating feeling that was overwhelming her. Upon returning to their apartment in an exclusive residential complex on the Upper East Side, she collapsed in the middle of the living room without even taking off her shoes. She begged Michael to take her to the emergency room, but he just stared at his phone screen without looking up, and now responded to her pleas by throwing ice water on her. In the entryway, the wheels of a suitcase began to rattle on the tiles. Brenda emerged from the guest room in a new fur-trimmed coat, a brightly colored silk scarf tied carelessly around her neck. Seeing the puddle on the floor, she wrinkled her nose in disgust and sidestepped it, pointing out that the hardwood was now soaked. She told her son to leave his wife alone, or they would miss their flight. Behind her, Arthur appeared, carrying a paper bag with high-end liquor bottles, and, with complete indifference, said they needed to hurry because there could be traffic on the LIE on the way to JFK. Emily lifted her head, but everything was blurring before her eyes. She saw Michael slip their IDs into the inner pocket of his jacket and grab the handle of the suitcase. It was the same suitcase she had bought him with her Christmas bonus because before his first business trip, he had sent her a photo of his old duffel bag, begging for a new one. Barely moving her lips, she whispered the word hospital again. Michael stopped, looked her up and down with a gaze full of irritation, and declared that his parents had come to New York specifically for the holidays. He had decided to give them a gift and take them to Miami Beach for a few days, and she dared to ruin their mood with her tantrums. Brenda was quick to agree, calling her daughter-in-law petty, and added that other wives leave the house sparkling clean after the holidays and only then lie down to rest, and that this one couldn't be spoiled at all. Otherwise, the whole family would end up dancing to her tune. Emily's fingers trembled slightly. She tried to grab the edge of the sofa, but her palms slipped on the wet floor. A sharp pain surged from the bottom of her lungs again. She bit her lip until it bled to avoid making a single sound in front of those people. Michael slammed the empty glass down on the entryway console and with a long stride stepped over his wife's legs as he changed his shoes at the door with a glacial tone as if giving an order to a maid. He commanded her to get up immediately, dry the floor, and have the whole house gleaming for when they returned. He threatened that if he came back with his parents and found her in that state again, the conversation would be very short. Emily watched his back as he walked away. There was a time when she believed that in marriage, people supported each other, at least during illnesses. She knew his coldness, but deep down she harbored the stupid hope that her condition would awaken in him, if only a drop of compassion. Brenda, already crossed the threshold, turned around and authoritatively ordered her leftover food in the fridge so it wouldn't spoil before their return. The electronic lock beeped, and the footsteps of the three people began to fade away. A few seconds later, from the hallway, came Michael's cheerful laughter as he talked about the VIP lounges at the airport. The door slammed shut, and the dry click of the lock isolated the apartment from the outside world. Silence fell. Emily lay in the puddle of water, staring at the ceiling spotlights that blurred. In her eyes, like a white fog, she had no strength to cry or scream. Slowly extending her arm, she fumbled for her phone on the end table. The screen lit up, but the fingerprint reader wouldn't work because of her wet fingers. After drying her hand on the edge of her apron, she managed to unlock the device on the third try and dialed 911. Her voice broke right after she said the apartment number. The operator on the other end of the line asked her to stay conscious and inquired if any family members were home. Looking at the empty entryway, Emily replied that there was no one. When the paramedics arrived, she was already delirious and couldn't even remember how many times they had buzzed the intercom. The medics got in using the building code she had managed to dictate over the phone. A young female EMT knelt, touched her forehead, and in an alarmed voice, noted a very high fever and some very ugly crackles in her lungs. As they carried her out on a stretcher, through the entryway, she noticed the glass on the console, with water droplets sliding down its sides like the fingerprints Michael had left behind. The light in the emergency room hurt her eyes. They inserted a needle into the pater vein on the back of her hand, and a cold solution began to slowly enter her bloodstream. The doctor, after listening to her lungs and analyzing the tests, informed her, in a calm but terrifying tone, that she had acute pneumonia, and that, if she had delayed a little longer, the consequences would have been fatal. He asked where her family was, but she remained silent. The nurse adjusted the IV drip and pulled the curtain. Behind the fabric, another patient coughed, raggedly, while their family members called for the doctors in a panic. It reminded her of how Michael had left her to die on the floor. The contrast was bitterly comical. Emily took her phone out of her purse. Her movements were clumsy due to the tape on her hand. A notification from the car's dashcam app hung on the screen, indicating a successful sync. The car was in Michael's name, but Emily had paid the entire down payment on the loan, fearing he might get behind the wheel after his drinking binges. She had installed the most modern dashcam model with an in-cabin audio recording feature, and the app had remained linked to her own account. Michael was too lazy to ever look at it. She just wanted to see if they had gotten far and played the latest video without headphones. Brenda's voice erupted from the speaker. The mother-in-law argued that her son had acted absolutely correctly. Stubborn women like her had to be tamed, and if he kept her without food in an empty apartment for 3 days, she would come, crawling back on her knees and start fulfilling her wifely duties. Fingers froze on the blanket. A rustling sound was heard, and Michael, with a little laugh, agreed with his mother. He complained that his wife had been thinking too highly of herself lately, playing sick at the slightest thing, and that he needed to be tougher with her. Then Brenda started talking about the apartment. She was incensed that a luxury property on the Upper East Side was registered only in the Plosting daughter-in-law's name. According to her logic, if they were married, the apartment belonged to the whole family. It irritated Brenda that a woman whose parents weren't even alive owned such luxury by herself, and she demanded that Michael immediately force his wife to add him to the deed. Silence fell in the car for a couple of seconds, and then Michael's voice sounded as clear as if he were standing right next to Emily's bed. He assured his mother that he would definitely add his name to the documents soon, and that when Emily got pregnant and went on maternity leave, she would have to obey him in everything anyway. At that moment, Arthur chimed in, advising him not to rush and to make his daughter-in-law take out some of her savings and give it to them to open a beauty salon for his sister. Michael agreed. Brenda threatened family ostracism if Emily refused and snorted with contempt, recalling that his wife had come to the house with only a set of appliances and should be grateful that Michael had even taken her in. The click of a lighter sounded. Arthur started smoking inside the car. Michael agreed with his father, noting that what his wife feared most was being without a family, so if they systematically pressured her, she would hand over everything herself, down to the last cent. Emily hit the pause button. The medical device next to the bed beeped rhythmically. The drops of medication descended through the tube, but the heat inside her was suddenly replaced by a deathly chill. It wasn't the effect of the Plode antipyretic, but the icy wind of betrayal chilling her to the bone. She looked at her hand. Near the tape, a little blood had backed up into the tube. Without removing the needle, she silently saved the audio recording to the cloud and forwarded it to her secret email. When she finished, she put the phone aside and closed her eyes. She had bought that Upper East Side apartment with the life insurance money left after her parents' death, and with the bonuses she had saved for years working as a project director. On the day of the final payment, she went to the bank alone. The bank employee asked if she was waiting for her husband, but she replied that she wasn't waiting for anyone. At that time, she wasn't even married. The property deed from the county clerk's office and the bank transfer records impeccably proved that the apartment was purchased before the marriage, in cash, without a single mortgage payment. Every last cent was exclusively her money, absolute separate property. When they got married, Michael's family gave her nothing. Brenda declared that young people today preferred to be practical, so they would do without traditional gifts. But the day the expensive appliances were delivered to the new apartment, The mother-in-law, in front of the delivery men, dismissively stroked the clothes, refrigerator door, and proclaimed loudly that for the owner of such a property, the appliances could be a little better. Emily was dying of shame at that moment, and Michael, without looking up from his phone, muttered not to pay attention to his mother's words. Only now did she understand that they weren't just words, but the first test of boundaries. A probe to see how much more they could get out of her. The nurse came in to change the IV bag and, noticing Emily's pallor, asked if her heart hurt. Emily shook her head, and in a hoarse voice asked to call the probus doctor on duty, as she needed to sign some documents. The nurse objected that the patient was not yet in a condition to be discharged, but Emily, picking up her phone, responded firmly that she needed to urgently arrange some meetings. First, she called work and arranged for her medical leave. Her boss, upon hearing her voice, told her to forget about projects, send the pout doctor's note, and recover peacefully. After hanging up, she scrolled through her contacts, found the number she was looking for, and pressed call. On the third ring, Rodrigo, a real estate agent specializing in luxury properties in downtown Manhattan, answered. She had bought the apartment through him, and his name frequently appeared in the building's residents group chat. Hearing her voice, Rodrigo was surprised by how late it was. Emily, looking at the transparent tube of the IV drip, in an A-drip, incredibly calm tone, informed him that she was putting her apartment up for salle, silence. The agent was stunned. An ideal floor plan. The best views. Prices in that area were only going up. Why sell such a property with such urgency? Emily cut him off, stating that she had no intention of waiting. She offered a 20% discount on the market value with a single condition. The buyer had to pay the full amount, immediately in cash or via a wire transfer, and close the sale with a real estate attorney as soon as possible. If possible, the next day. She would only take her personal belongings. She would have the furniture and appliances removed herself. The apartment would be empty and ready for move-in. Rodrigo asked in a serious tone if she was aware that with such a discount, buyers would be lining up, but that the demand for instant payment was very restrictive. Emily replied that she was in her absolute right mind, would send him the documents right away, and that the attorney and the deed recording at the county clerk's office could be arranged for the next day. She promised to be present for the signing. The agent didn't argue and immediately started calling his list of preferred clients with liquid assets. After finishing the call, Emily leaned back on the pillow. The pain in her chest hadn't disappeared, but now she had a clear plan of action. She opened the Blung.org cloud, compressed the purchase agreement, bank statements, and deeds proving premarital ownership into a single folder. She didn't call Michael. Asking someone who has already stabbed you in the back why they did it was pointless. It would just give them time to prepare. In the morning, she was awakened by a call from Rodrigo. He had found a buyer, a family with a daughter who had been renting in the area for a long time and waiting for such an opportunity. Upon hearing the price, they were ready to wire the earnest money immediately. Their condition was simple: visit the apartment that afternoon, deposit the money in escrow by the evening, and sign the transfer of ownership the next day. In the morning, Emily coughed as she sat up in bed. The nurse tried to make her lie down, but she stopped her with a gesture and told the real estate agent that the schedule was perfect. That same morning, she would call some movers and empty the house. The attending physician flatly refused to discharge her, so she signed out against medical advice, taking full responsibility. She took the pills they gave her, put on her coat, and went outside. Her face was as white as paper, but her steps were firm. When she arrived at the building, the doorman in the lobby noticed her condition and asked about her health. Emily informed him that she was moving out and that a moving truck would be arriving soon, for which he would need to open the place service gate. The doorman was perplexed but noted it in the log. As she rode up, in the elevator, she looked at her reflection. Her hair was disheveled, her lips bloodless, and her eyes shone feverishly. She pulled her mask up a bit higher and opened the door. In the apartment, everything was exactly as it was after the trio had left. The puddle on the floor had dried, leaving cloudy stains. Brenda's colorful scarf was thrown on the sofa. Arthur's half-drunk glass sat on the table. Michael's sneakers were carelessly tossed in the entryway. Emily put on disposable gloves and started packing. Her personal belongings were few: documents, clothes, her work laptop, and an old photo album of her parents. All of it easily fit into a single suitcase. The rest of the enormous apartment was filled with premium appliances, bought with her hard-earned money, and mountains of junk that Michael's family had brought over, feeling like the rightful owners of the place. At exactly 10 a.m., the movers arrived. The foreman, Furman, immediately assessed the scope of the job and asked if they had to take everything. Emily handed him a pre-printed list: the refrigerator, washer and dryer, televisions, air purifiers, the designer table, and the orthopedic mattress. All of that was to be carefully packed and taken to a rented storage unit. She showed him a Cajuns.si stack of electronic receipts in her name, proving she was the rightful owner of those goods. Furman nodded and asked what they should do with the rest. Emily pointed to the guest room and the terrace, declaring that everything else was trash to be put in 30-gallon industrial black bags. She instructed them to call a junk removal service for the bulky furniture, promising to pay the crew generously for the bulky furniture. Work and disposal. At the dump, there were no more questions. The apartment filled with noise, the ripping of packing tape, the whir of power drills, and the hum of the refrigerator being unplugged. The huge television that Michael loved to show off to his friends while playing video games was taken down from the wall, revealing clean wallpaper, as if a fake poster had been torn off. Brenda's scarf flew straight into a trash bag. The dirty dishes and the glass went to the same place. One of the movers took Michael's suits out of the closet and asked where to send them. Emily looked coldly at the cheap, pilled polyester on the sleeves. She had bought one of those suits for him in the early days of their marriage, and although he had complained then that it was expensive, at home he boasted to his mother about the bargain he had found at a sale. "Throw it all in the trash," she ordered. The mover froze for a second, but didn't argue. Into the black bags went Michael's shirts, his ridiculous ties, his smelly sneakers, and his half-used bottles of cologne. Every time they sealed a bag, the plastic rustled loudly. Emily took out her phone and methodically photographed all the trash bags in the loading process. She wasn't doing it for sentimentality. It was the perfect alibi in case the family decided to report a theft of personal property to the police. At noon, the buyers arrived. The young wife held her daughter's hand and felt a little awkward seeing the empty apartment in the middle of being packed up. Rodrigo quickly explained that the seller was vacating the property that day, so the key handover would be immediate. The buyer's husband fascinatingly examined the panoramic windows in the living room and the city views. Unable to hide his smile, he asked again if they were really going to sign the contract for that price. Emily, standing in the entryway, replied in a clear voice that the apartment had a clean title, was free of liens and mortgages, had no registered occupants. The main condition was to sign the papers by evening and wire the money to the escrow agent. The next morning, as soon as the county clerk's office confirmed the change of ownership, they could change the locks and move in. The buyer's wife cautiously asked if the apartment had any hidden defects, given that she was getting rid of it in such a hurry. Emily, handing her the certificates of good standing with the HOA and paid property taxes, replied that the apartment was in perfect condition. She was simply physically unable to be in a place where people she never wanted to see again had once set foot. The buyer understood everything upon looking into her eyes and asked no more questions. After verifying from the title report that Emily was the sole owner, they were reassured. In the afternoon, Emily, after swallowing another dose of fever reducer, sat in the closing room of the attorney's office. Rodrigo read the points of the contract. The buyer's lawyer meticulously checked the property's status and asked about her marriage. Emily presented all the bank statements proving the blank he purchased before the wedding with a 100% cash payment. She emphasized that it was her separate property and no one else had any claim to it. The attorney nodded, satisfied. The buyer provided the wire transfer confirmation. When the sum of the deposited funds appeared on the computer screen, Emily's gaze lingered for a moment. It was 20% less than the market rate. A colossal amount of money. But she didn't feel a drop of regret. That price difference was the fee for the emergency extermination of the parasites from her life. Around 7 p.m., the last moving truck left for the storage facility. Emily returned to the empty apartment. Her footsteps echoed off the bare walls. There was no sofa or mattress. She had even taken the expensive dinnerware from the kitchen. Only tiny holes from pictures remained on the walls, which the movers had carefully filled with putty. The hardwood was polished, and thanks to the open windows, the smell of Brenda's cheap perfume and Michael's cigarettes had dissipated without a trace. In the Pras building's rear courtyard, a row of 30-gallon black bags lined the dumpsters. Next to them lay Michael's old gym bag with its torn handle. The security guard, making his rounds, shyly asked if she was moving out for good. Emily, while putting the junk removal receipts in her purse, confirmed it and asked him to update the resident lists starting the next day. The guard looked at the mountain of bags, his face pale, and wanted to ask something, but he just nodded and wished her a speedy recovery. When she went back upstairs, the locksmith, called by the new owners, was already installing the new electronic lock. The old panel had been removed, and a new, unusual chime sounded. A little girl, standing in the center of the empty living room, tugged at her mother's sleeve, asking if they were really going to live there. The mother was smiling with happiness. Emily left the 2 old key cards on a happiness ledge. The code had been changed, the keys handed over. It was now fully their home. The buyers thanked her from the heart. Rodrigo escorted her to the elevator. Before the doors closed, Emily took one last look at the front door. The floor and the door number were the same, but that place had nothing to do with her anymore. In fact, it had never been a shared home. Stepping out onto the street, she hailed a cab and gave the address of a luxury hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The driver, noticing her sickly appearance in the wanted rearview mirror, offered to turn on the heat. Emily declined, leaned her head against the cold glass and closed her eyes. The phone began to vibrate, incessantly. It was photos from Michael. In the first, Brenda, wearing sunglasses, made a victory sign with her fingers in front of the Mediterranean Sea. In the second, a spectacular lobster stew steamed in an expensive restaurant with a message from Michael. Mom is thrilled. The third message, read, if you're feeling better, clean the whole house. My parents will need to rest from the trip, so don't you dare play sick again. Emily didn't even move a frouse muscle. The taxi turned onto Park Avenue. The lights of nighttime New York flashed by the window. She locked the screen and placed the phone face down. At the hotel reception, the concierge, noticing her deep cough, immediately offered her a glass of hot water with lemon. Emily thanked him, took the key, card, and went up to her suite. The room was perfectly silent. The sheets were crisp and clean. She took the draft of the divorce settlement agreement out of her bag and left it on the table. Next, she uploaded all the audio recordings from the dash cam, the sales, contract, bank statements, photos of the trash bags, and the disposal invoices to a shared folder with her lawyer. Despite her atrocious exhaustion, she wrote, to her lawyer, a specialist in matrimonial law, we're starting the process on the terms we discussed. The apartment is sold, and the money is in my personal account. I've uploaded the audio recording, proving my husband's intent to seize my separate property and his failure to render aid. I also request you investigate an additional matter. My husband used his corporate card to buy designer handbags and cosmetics for his mother. I am attaching copies of the expense reports, receipts, and screenshots of the delivery texts to my mother-in-law's number. The lawyer replied almost instantly, let's talk tomorrow morning. The main thing now is for you to rest and, under no circumstances, delete the original, Phyllis. Only then did Emily get into bed. As the soft duvet enveloped her, the tension vanished, and her lungs once again responded with a dull ache. She looked at the blank ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Here, there was no mother-in-law demanding to be served food immediately. There was no husband mocking her illness. No father-in-law lecturing her on a wife's duties. The next morning, the electronic deed recording was successfully completed. Rodrigo sent her a notification that the change of ownership had been confirmed by the county clerk's office. Emily opened her banking app, looked at the colossal sum in her account, swallowed her pill with hot water, and with a steady hand, signed the divorce agreement. At that very moment, her lawyer called her. Emily, the divorce petition will be sent today to his registered home and work addresses. As for the division of assets, we can claim all the amounts he withdrew from your account, supposedly, for family expenses, but which he sent to his relatives. As for the embezzlement of company funds, that's a different story. Are you sure you want to hand over that data to his employer? He could face criminal charges and completely destroy his career. Emily opened her laptop. Since last year, Michael had offloaded all the work of Prugov Klug, filling out his expense reports for the accounting department onto her, knowing she did it quickly. He was convinced she just crunched the numbers without reading the justifications. But she had saved a copy of the report where a $3,500 handbag from a luxury store at Hudson Yards was passed off as a Christmas gift to a VIP client. And on the courier's delivery slip, in black and white, was Brenda's address and phone number. The payment for the vacation they were enjoying at the 5-star hotel in Miami Beach had also been expensed as travel and entertainment for a business trip. Emily replied to her lawyer calmly. We're not going to blackmail him with these documents. You can send the materials directly to his company's security and human resources departments anonymously. I want him to face the consequences. The lawyer, after a brief pause, agreed. Emily brought the cup to her lips. When he threw ice water on her with a fever of almost 104 degrees Fahrenheit, he didn't think she could die from thermal shock or pneumonia. She felt not a drop of pity. Her world was now rebooting. But before starting from scratch, she needed to eliminate that virus from her system for good. 3 days later, Michael's family returned to New York. It was late at night. Brenda carried 2 bags of souvenirs from Miami. Her scarf was now a bright orange. Arthur dragged the suitcase, scratching his sunburned face. Michael walked ahead, spinning the car keys on his finger and complaining about the car. Outrageous parking fees at JFK. Brenda clicked her tongue and declared that as soon as they got inside, they would make their daughter-in-law prepare them some chicken soup. As the hotel buffets had left her feeling bloated, Michael let out a chuckle and said his wife would surely have left everything spotless, given that he had given her a clear order before leaving. In the elevator, their downstairs neighbor joined them, seeing them with their suitcases. She glanced at them strangely and asked if they had been on vacation. Brenda, with an arrogant smile, replied that her wonderful son had taken them for a getaway to the coast. The neighbor gave Michael a long, searching look. She wanted to say something, but held her tongue and turned away. The elevator reached their floor. Michael, humming under his breath, approached the door and lifted the cover of the electronic lock. He entered the code. The lock emitted a short error signal. Michael's fingers froze. He frowned and entered the code again. Another error. The smile vanished from Brenda's face. What's wrong? Did you forget the numbers? Michael turned pale and entered the combination a 3rd time. The lock erupted in a shrill alarm. A red light began to flash. Arthur dropped the suitcase with a thud and grumbled, "She changed the code just to mess with us." Brenda's face flushed with anger instantly. Handing the bags to her husband, she lunged at the Prasa's door and began to pound on it with her fists. "Emily, I know you're in there. Who do you think you are, you ungrateful wretch? Open this door right now." Her shouts echoed throughout the hallway. The peephole of the neighboring door darkened. Michael turned red with shame and tried to pull his mother away, hissing that the neighbors were watching. But Brenda was furious and started kicking the door, screaming that her son worked himself to the bone to pay for this apartment, and she dared to leave her mother-in-law in the hallway. At that moment, the lock clicked and the door opened a crack. Michael immediately straightened his shoulders, preparing to yell at his wife and show the neighbors who was boss. But behind the door appeared a sturdy man in his 40s, in a house t-shirt. He held a phone in his hand and looked at them with undisguised irritation. "Can I help you? What kind of circus are you people running here?" he snapped. Brenda's jaw dropped. Michael was frozen. Through the ajar door, a completely empty living room was visible, and where Michael's huge TV used to hang, there was a child's playmat. On the terrace, pink toddler leggings were drying. In the prod 3 days, the apartment had become a stranger's. "And who are you?" Michael's voice cracked into a falsetto. "This is my apartment. Where's Emily? Get her on the phone right now." The man narrowed his eyes menacingly and threw the door wide open. "I'm the owner of this apartment. We bought it and moved in yesterday. If you don't get out of here immediately, I'm calling the police for attempted breaking. And, entering, Brenda burst into a hysterical fit, trying to push her way inside. What? Purchase? This is my son's apartment. Who are you, her lover? Get out of here. The man shoved her firmly by the shoulder. Don't you dare touch me, lady. I'll have you all in a holding cell right now. Brenda collapsed to the hallway floor and began to shriek, demanding they call in the police to see who would get the handcuffs, and screaming that she would rip Emily's hair out for such a scam. The downstairs neighbors had already come up the stairs to gossip about the scandal. Michael finally understood that something irreparable was happening. With trembling hands, he took out his phone and dialed Emily's number. The first call went to voicemail. On the second, a mechanical voice informed him that the user was unavailable. The lock's alarm had stopped, but Brenda's screams and the new owner's calm voice dictating the address to the 911 operator had turned the hallway into a circus. 10 minutes later, 2 NYPD officers stepped out of the elevator. They immediately dispersed the onlookers. The owner of the apartment raised his hand. I'm the one who called. These people are pounding on my door, claiming this is their house. Michael rushed towards the officers. Officer, this is a misunderstanding. This is my wife's apartment. We just got back from vacation and found this guy here. The officer looked at the owner, who showed him a recent scan of the property, deed from the county clerk's office, and his ID on his phone. The electronic recording was done 3 days ago. The money has been transferred. The deeds signed. My family and I are already registered residents here. We installed the locks at our own expense. The officer carefully verified the data and radioed it in to dispatch to check. A deathly silence fell in the hallway, ordering her to be quiet, but she snapped back that all those papers were fake. Michael stood there, feeling his mouth go dry. In his mind, the day of his departure flashed, Emily's cold, dead eyes as she lay on the wet floor. He had thought it was just a hysterical fit then, but now he realized it had been a final warning. The officer, after finishing the check, abruptly changed his tone. The documents are in order. Legally, this property does not belong to your wife, or you. If you have any disputes over property, resolve them in court. But right now, you are disturbing the peace and attempting to enter a private residence. Leave the building immediately, or you're coming to the precinct. Michael turned as white as the wall. That's impossible. She couldn't sell the apartment without my consent. We're married. The officer sighed wearily. The property was listed exclusively in her name as separate property. If you have complaints, talk to your lawyers. But you have no business here. Out. Hearing that, Brenda lunged forward again. What do you mean we have no business? And where are my son's things? His suits? His expensive watches? Where are our things? The homeowner smirked. Ma'am, we moved into a completely empty apartment. There wasn't a speck of dust. Who are you trying to scam? Michael's voice became a hysterical croak. Where is my refrigerator? Where is the TV? The building's doorman, who had been standing by the elevator the whole time, approached the officers and calmly clarified. The former owner called some moving trucks 3 days ago. All the furniture, good furniture, and appliances were taken to a storage unit, and the rest of the junk old clothes, some worn-out sneakers, and some cheap suits, she ordered the movers to put in 30-gallon black trash bags and threw them out, paying a service for the bulky item pickup. Brenda's neck stretched unnaturally. To the trash? The doorman, ignoring her, wild-eyed stare, nodded. Affirmative. She supervised it personally. Someone, among the neighbors, couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a laugh, quickly, hiding behind their door. Michael's face turned purple with rage. He raised his fist at the doorman. How dare you let her throw away my things? But the guard didn't even flinch. What's it to me? The owner ordered it, and the movers did it. All according to building rules. The police stepped between them. All right, show's over. Grab your bags and hit. In the road? Or I'm opening a file on you right now for public disturbance, disobeying an officer. The owner of the apartment, before slamming the door, shot at Michael. If I see you around here again, I'm pressing charges. Go. Solve your family soap operas on the street. The door closed heavily, and lock beeped. Michael stood planted in the middle of the hallway. His ears were ringing. With trembling hands, he dialed Emily's number again and again. On the 7th try, the ringing stopped, and the call was answered. Soft classical music played in the background, and the faint clinking of a teaspoon against porcelain could be heard. Emily, Michael growled through clenched teeth. Where are you? Have you completely lost your mind? Selling the apartment behind my back? Emily was sitting by the window in her hotel room, looking at her hot chamomile tea. She hadn't even put him on speaker, enjoying his agitated, panicked breathing through the earpiece. I cleaned the apartment before your return, just as you asked. The sale was urgent, and all the trash you filled my house with, I sent to the landfill. It's much cleaner now. There was not a hint of emotion in her voice. Michael could barely breathe. You're insane. My expensive suits in the trash? She replied indifferently. A few cheap polyester rags and some sneakers that stank up the whole hallway. I paid for the junk removal. If you don't like it, go complain to the dump. Michael lost what little sanity he had left and started screaming in the middle of the hallway. Come back immediately. My parents are on the street. Do you? I want to leave us homeless? Emily watched the ripples on the surface of her tea. Your parents just kicked in someone else's door and made a fool of themselves in front of the police. So, you've already ruined your own reputation. Brenda's shrill voice broke in on the line. You viper! You sold the apartment. My son poured his heart and soul into. Bring us the money right now. Every last. So, Emily moved the phone slightly away from her ear, waited for the screeching to stop, and in a glacial tone, pronounced, Brenda, I bought that apartment in cash before the marriage. Your son didn't put a single dollar into it, and neither did you. The divorce petition has already been sent to the address where you are registered. Get used to keeping your distance. Hearing herself, addressed with such cold formality, Brenda choked. Michael snatched the phone back. What divorce? Stop this nonsense. Give back the money. Cancel the sale, and I'll overlook this little tantrum. Emily silently placed the cup on its saucer. The sale is closed. The new owners have already changed the code. Show up there again, and you'll sleep in a jail. Trell. Michael paced the hallway, catching the mocking glances of the neighbors through their slightly ajar doors. Why are you doing this to us? Over a simple fight, you stab us in the back. Do you even have a heart? Emily remained silent. Her own face, drenched in ice water, appeared before her. Eyes, the fever, and the words from the dashcam. We'll keep her without food for 3 days. She had no desire to cast pearls before swine. I took what was mine. and I sorted and threw out the trash, she said dryly. Sign the divorce papers. From now on, all communication will be through my lawyer. She hung up and blocked the number. A second later, Brenda called. Blocked. Then, Arthur. Blocked. Silence fell. Alone in the empty hallway, Michael stared stupidly at the dark screen. Brenda clung to his sleeve. Mikey, my son, what are we going to do now? Where are we? Going to sleep? Arthur's face turned gray. We're going to a cheap motel. First thing tomorrow, we hire a lawyer, and we'll take her to the cleaners in court. Michael nodded convulsively, believing that by law, everything in a marriage is divided 50/50. The police officer who was walking down the stairs overheard him and shouted, "File all the lawsuits you want, but you're getting out of here, right now." The entire trio, dragging their suitcases like beaten dogs, scurried out to the street. In the elevator, Brenda hurled curses, but Michael wasn't listening anymore. On his phone screen, a message from the head of his company's HR department appeared. Michael, tomorrow at 9 a.m., you must report to the security department. We have some very serious questions regarding possible embezzlement with the corporate card. Based on an anonymous tip, a cold sweat ran down his back. The next morning, when Michael, pale as death, opened the door to the office conference room, he understood that the sale of the apartment had been just the beginning. At the large table sat the director of HR, the head of security, and his direct supervisor. In the center of the table was an envelope with his name on it, and next to it, a copy of the divorce petition. The HR director began without preamble. Yesterday, we received some documents. Use of the corporate card for personal purposes and falsification of expense reports. Michael swallowed nervously. It's a mistake. My wife is getting revenge because of the divorce. It's all fake. The head of security threw some printouts on the table. December, Hudson Yards. A $3,500 handbag expensed as a Christmas gift to a VIP partner. Courier's delivery slip lists a Miss Brenda, your mother, as the recipient, along with her cell phone number. What kind of partner is that? Michael's lips trembled. His boss, who always guarded the department's reputation, looked at him with open contempt. The security head turned the page. February. High-end cosmetics worth $2,000. The store's loyalty card is in your mother's name. And finally, the payment for a 5-star hotel in Miami Beach. This very month, expensed as T&E. Give me the names of the clients you were entertaining there. Michael tried to find an excuse, but screenshots, delivery texts, and his personal account statements were stapled to every invoice. This was the price of his laziness. When he was lying on the sofa with his video games, tossing crumpled receipts at Emily with a, "You fix it." She had been meticulously compiling a dossier on him. She was no naive fool. She had simply waited for the perfect moment to deliver the finishing blow. "I can explain everything," Michael babbled. But his boss cut him off sharply. "Do you have any idea how you've compromised the entire department? Management is already on our backs about budgets. And you're buying your mommy little purses on the company's dime. I'll pay the money back." "My wife provoked me," Michael babbled pathetically. The security head smirked. "So, you admit to the embezzlement?" Michael opened his mouth, but no words came out. If he denied it, he'd have to invent non-existent clients. If he admitted it, it was a full-blown criminal offense. Embezzlement. HR delivered the verdict. As of this moment, you are suspended without pay. Hand over your access card and your company laptop. You are terminated for cause. Prepare to reimburse the full amount misappropriated, or we will turn the case over to the police. They escorted Michael out of the conference room. Humiliating glances. The lobby security guard, threw his personal effects, a notepad, a thermos, and an old keyboard into a cardboard box and walked him to the exit. In the glass of the revolving door, Michael saw his pathetic reflection. Where had that successful New Yorker, who boasted of VIP lounges, gone? In the cheap motel room, Brenda pounced on him as soon as he entered, peppering him with questions about the lawyer and the lawsuit. Michael dropped the box on the floor. I've been fired. Silence fell in the room. Arthur stopped channel surfing. Brenda shrieked. That fiend even went to your job. Michael handed her the disciplinary termination letter, where the words embezzlement and legal action were highlighted in bold. Brenda ripped the paper to shreds. We were living so well. She's destroyed your career. Tomorrow, I'm going to her office, and I'll rip her hair out, one by one. Michael grabbed his mother by the shoulders. Mom, bring that handbag and the cosmetics here right now. We'll sell them on eBay. If I don't pay the company back, they'll put me in jail. Brenda recoiled as if from the plague. What are you saying? That's my gift. Why? Should I have to give up my things? I bought them with company money. Michael exploded. Brenda collapsed onto the bed and burst into tears, cursing her daughter-in-law, the unfair world, and her ungrateful son. Arthur nervously lit a cigarette and grunted, "Pack your bags. There's no more money to pay for this place. We're going back to my hometown in Ohio, and that purse is going to a pawn shop." Brenda sobbed loudly, refusing to part with her luxuries. Listening to her wails, Michael felt, for the first time in his life, not pity, but nausea. Before, upon hearing that sound, Emily would take out her wallet and take care of any problem. Now, those laments solved nothing. Emily had preemptively filed a police report for threats and harassment, attaching all the recordings, the hospital records, and the police report from the altercation at the apartment. She was granted a restraining order, something uncommon for these types of civil situations, but supported by the pressure from her lawyers. The notification was sent to Michael's family. The next day, Emily had just finished a presentation for some investors. Her boss asked how she was feeling and if she wanted to go home. She replied that she was perfectly fine. At 3 p.m., Brenda appeared in the lobby of the exclusive office building in the financial district where Emily worked. Wearing the same wrinkled coat and with a crazed look, she tried to force her way through the Feipling turnstiles, waving a piece of paper with the address. Security blocked her path. I'm the mother-in-law of one of your employees. Call her down right now. Brenda shrieked. The guard checked the list of restricted individuals and coldly asked her to leave. Brenda threw her purse, the one from Hudson Yards, onto the marble floor and made a disgraceful scene, screaming that her daughter-in-law had robbed her. So, Emily came down to the ground floor, accompanied by the head of security. She approached the turnstiles and, in a calm, mechanical voice, pronounced, Brenda, you are violating a court order of protection to stay 100 yards away from my workplace. Brenda lunged at the glass. What order? You've taken everything from my son. Give back the money from the apartment. You cheated on him and left us on the street. Emily didn't even raise her voice. She turned to security. Call a patrol car. Violation of a court order and public disturbance. Brenda screamed, trying to convince the crowd of office workers that Emily was a swindler. Then Emily, clearly and loudly, so that everyone in the lobby could hear, declared, "The apartment was purchased by me before the marriage with my personal funds. Your son didn't contribute a cent, and he was fired because he stole from his company to buy you that very handbag, now lying on the floor, passing it off as a client gift. If you don't like it, we'll see you in court." A dead silence fell in the lobby. Brenda instinctively clutched the purse to her chest, thus perfectly confirming Emily's words. The police arrived. Ignoring the mother-in-law's cries that she was an elderly woman, they handcuffed her for disobedience and disorderly conduct. Emily watched silently as they dragged in Brenda towards the exit, her handbag banging against the glass doors. The project director approached Emily and asked in a low voice, "Is everything all right?" "Yes. I have to make some corrections to the budget," she replied, and walked towards the elevators. A few days later, Emily and Michael sat in the lawyer's office to try to reach an out-of-court settlement. Michael had lost weight, had a few days' worth of stubble, and looked pathetic in a cheap suit. Emily wore a sober black pantsuit. Michael started to whimper. "Was it really necessary to have my mother put in a holding cell?" Emily, without looking at him, replied, "The police put the cuffs on her because she broke the law. And who threw ice water on me when I was dying with a 103-degree fever?" Michael hesitated. "I thought you were faking." Emily tossed a small device on the table and played the recording from the place. Dashcam. The 3 days without food, the plan to steal her apartment. An oppressive silence filled the office. Emily's lawyer laid out the conditions. And B. Express uncontested divorce. Michael's waiver of any financial claim on the claim, money from the apartment sale, and reimbursement of the money stolen with the apartment sale, corporate card. Otherwise, the criminal complaint would go directly to the district attorney's office. Michael tore at his hair. "Where am I going to get the money? My account is at 0. Why are you destroying me?" Emily looked at him with a glacial stare. "You demanded loans from me to maintain your status, to pay for your sister's beauty salon, and you wanted to move your parents in at my expense. You thought I would pay for all your miserable actions. Now, the bill has come to you, personally. Sign." His own lawyer whispered to Michael that if they went to trial over the Tide Blanken the Tinde apartment, he would lose 100%. And for the embezzlement, he would end up in slave prison. Michael lifted his tear-filled eyes like a beaten dog. Can't we really work this out?" Emily twisted the cap onto her pen. It clicked shut like a gunshot. He signed all the papers. Michael had to sell his car at a loss and force his mother to pawn all her jewelry at a cash-for-gold shop for peanuts to partially settle his debt with the company. The rest would be claimed by the IRS through wage garnishments. They moved into a dilapidated house in a small town in Ohio. The relatives who once admired Michael now laughed behind his back, calling him a thief whose wife had kicked him to the curb. Brenda fell ill with depression, and Arthur spent his days drinking and yelling at her to shut her mouth, or they'd lose even that shack. Emily never set foot on the Upper East Side again. With part of the money from the sale, she rented a premium apartment in a gated community with tight security. The day she received the notification of the divorce decree through her lawyer's online portal, she left the law firm, and her phone rang. It was an unknown Ohio area code. She answered. Michael's hoarse voice came through. It's me. I'm begging you, don't hang up. My mom is sick. My dad drinks non-stop. I'm working as a warehouse loader, unloading trucks to pay the IRS garnishments. I was an idiot. Forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back to me. Just tell your lawyers to lower the monthly garnishment amount. I'm drowning. I don't even have enough to live on. Emily looked at the cold winter sky reflected in the glass of the skyscrapers. Drowning. He didn't know what it was to drown on the floor with bilateral pneumonia, while your husband stepped over you saying, "Clean up for when we get back. Everything will be garnished according to the court order," she replied, enunciating each word. She pressed the end call button and sent the number to her spam list. She felt no resentment. True revenge isn't hysterical outbursts, but a perfect block that prevents parasites from injecting even an ounce of their filth into your life. At that very moment, Michael stood in the frozen dirt yard of a small town house. Through the cracked window pane, he could hear his mother's cough and his father's drunken shouts. Next to the fence lay his old suitcase with the broken wheel, trapped in a thick sheet of ice. Only now did he realize that the door hadn't closed on him 3 days ago. He had closed it himself every time he took money from his wife's wallet, every time he laughed at his mother's humiliations, and when he left his sick wife to die. Emily returned to the office, opened her desk drawer, and placed the divorce decree inside. In the back corner rested a small supermarket receipt for the purchase of 3 0-gallon trash bags in which her previous life had ended up. She turned on the paper shredder and dropped the receipt inside. The mechanism, with a whir, turned the paper into dust, mixing it with the rest of the waste. Total destruction. A meeting reminder popped up. Emily picked up her laptop and walked with a firm step towards the conference room. She had cleaned her house without leaving a speck of dust. Now, only she knew all the passwords to her life.